Okay, thanks. I think, the lady over here, she had mentioned that the study was more focused on the white-collar jobs. But we are also seeing, with the advent of AI, even the dividing line between white-collar and blue-collar jobs, in a sense, getting blurred. For example, it's often said that the factory of the future will have only 2 employees. This is an extreme way of putting it. It'll have only 2 employees, a person, a human being, and a dog. And the job of the human being is to feed the dog, and the job of the dog is to prevent the human being from touching any of the machinery. So that's the extent to which automation has gone. But clearly, some jobs in AI, software, all of that are getting created. So even the fungibility between blue and white collar jobs may change. But I want to come back to you, Sanjeev. You mentioned that not all jobs can be done this way, and there are enough anecdotal stories saying that companies don't want to, outsource or even freelance their strategic kind of work.
Whatever is mission critical,
so
you want to keep, wherever your IP resides, you want to keep it inside.
So what is the insights that you can give in terms of what kind of work we are likely to see which is getting...
I think mechanical, repetitive jobs, which are easily copyable by others and do not form your IP. So for example, we run 99 acres. We've got a team of 230 people that goes and verifies real estate listings. Are they real, or is somebody putting a fake listing, right? Now that's a certain standard operating procedure. There's a technology backbone, an app. The guy takes a photograph, reports it. That could be outsourced technically. We don't do it because we want reliability there. We want monitoring, supervision, and until we are confident of quality of outsourcing, we will not do it, right? But I want to come back to another point here. I think we are talking. All the examples we've taken are service industry, service sector, white collar. They require internet access. They require knowledge of English and possibly some other skill, right? You're talking about a small segment of population being impacted and possibly benefiting from it. If you say, 2/3 of India is in rural India and maybe 51% depend on agriculture, I don't know what the exact number is, Rajat, but this is what I recall. What is migrant labor, land-based labor, seasonal labor? It is freelance. It's just not online, right? And that is not going to change. They're not going to do this stuff online. You've got to work the land, okay? Even as a freelancer. 2 is, or as a farm owner. 2 is manufacturing. How on earth are you going to, this government has hung its hat on Make in India and saying it's manufacturing that can deliver a large number of jobs, and services less so. Right? Even though services may deliver great output, employment intensity may not be that much. Right? How are you going to do manufacturing on an online freelance basis? So there are many, many sectors that are not going to be impacted, and really a large number of people in India are not going to be impacted.
Okay, that puts a very different perspective as well as a sense of proportion on some of the numbers. Even I was a bit stunned when I saw the 80% jobs being capable of being outsourced.
In service industries, maybe.
Yeah, but with the clarifications, I think it made sense. So
there's a question there.
Yeah, can I just have a small suggestion? We will...
Just to mention that the health industry
is
very different.
Yes, also, my request to the audience is, I'm sure all of you have a lot of questions, but what I would suggest is, we'll go with the panel for the first 30 minutes, just half an hour. Please bear with us. And after that, we'll open it up to questions and to the floor. And you can ask any questions either on what they said or completely different. So we'll come to the audience questions in a few moments, and I'm sure there will be lots of them as well. Let me go back to Harsha. We've talked about a lot of the freelancing being applicable to jobs which can be done remotely. That has come out in many different ways. And the proportion is rising. I think with the passage of time, we are seeing more and more jobs becoming amenable for a variety of reasons. For example, even doctors, with the advent of Watson, we heard, for example, the famous doctor from Bangalore who at an event recently, he said that it's likely to become a law for doctors to consult with the AI engine before giving the final diagnosis, Now, with that happening, is this going to put all of these kinds of specialized work outside the pale of governmental control? what happens to sovereign control of so many different functions? How will the nature of that sovereignty and the kind of controls you talked about, international trade and things like that, how will that get impacted? It's going to be impacted hugely, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, it's already happening. The moment you work on platforms where you can aggregate, the moment location is not limited to one place or within a territory, you create possibilities of bypass, you create possibilities of inability to actually assess what is happening, and you create, not just create, it is actually the truth that the regulator is behind the curve in terms of the knowledge which is there. And what that means is that more and more, either you will end up with self-regulation, with some kind of principles, etc., or you will need the private players to explain to you what's happening. And that's a classic recipe for regulatory capture. So regulation is going to become far more difficult. But the first impulse is to actually impose very strict kind of conditions and limits, which is completely the wrong thing to do in a situation where bypass can be the rule.
Yeah. But self-regulation hasn't worked very well on the internet.
But you'll have to make it through some kind of, because with artificial intelligence, etc., coming, the situation is evolving. And what happens is that the problem is running faster than the solution. And secondly, I talked about regulatory collaboration and cooperation. You'll have to cooperate and collaborate with multiple sectors and multiple nations and territories. So it's a far more complex situation arising, and the instinctive response which regulators tend to have is to control has to be thrown out of the window. A new mindset of regulation has to evolve. And that can only evolve if we start discussing with other regulators on what are the problems, how are the solutions. In APEC they are discussing it, in various fora they are discussing it. I think the solution lies beyond the horizon which we can see now, but the sights have been set towards that horizon. We have to walk that journey, and we should be ready to walk that journey without the stick and the limits.
Interesting. We should have that conversation when a lot of government people and regulators are around. Yeah. But I think, but now that I'm out of government, I agree with you completely.
I've had it with some government regulators. They have agreed with me.
Yeah.
And
no, but honestly, I would have agreed even otherwise.
Yeah.
But I completely get the point. But going to Dr. Manish once again, we had recently, some of you may have seen that there's a lot of questions about job loss in India, job loss in the IT industry, and we had a lot of interest in the media about some of these questions. And at that time, while responding with all the facts and figures, we did also convey a sobering message to people saying that the reality is, whatever, sort of gloss we may put on it, the mantra, whether you are an individual or a company or an industry, is reskill or perish. So, in the context of all that is happening, both across the world and in India, what implications does this online freelancing have for skilling and reskilling?
I think India will have to face this challenge because of the way our demography is, in a way. If you look at, contextually, if I look at the number of people who are below poverty line is 20%. People who are above poverty line but below twice the poverty line. Above the poverty line but below twice the poverty line is 50%. That's a small economic shock, and you come down to poverty. And I think that is where the whole issue about reskilling and upskilling becomes very, very important to them. The earlier conversation that was going on about a general belief in the society that you have to be a government servant and that makes you stable, I think is because of that 50%. The 50% which aspires to get into government service, not the top 30% perhaps, many of us perhaps in this room belonging to the top 30%. So I guess if you look at the 70% of India, the reskilling and upskilling on a continuous basis is critical. The other 30% perhaps have money as well as an understanding that that's important and go about doing it of their own. To give an example, I've got a fee-based course as well as a grant-based course. And I look at what is the demand that's there in the fee-based against what might be there as a demand in the grant-based. And these demands are very different. So in the fee-based, it's mostly IT. Over the last 9-10 years that we have done, most of the money actually has gone on IT. So people are paying and they're getting into that. But on the grant side, we have found a very different combination, which varies from state to state, with some states obviously doing better than others. So I guess skilling, upskilling are going to be critical. The challenges would be that how do we ensure that the mindset about the government service itself not being important, but that you have to look at the changing world and look at the job in a very different way. How do we make that change happen in people's belief system? That's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, but when there is an enterprise, then the enterprise also takes some responsibility for reskilling. But if it's freelancing, then you're on your own. So is that a qualitative impact of that?
Yeah, it is a challenge. But then many of these freelancing websites actually have upskilling lessons out there. So I've actually enrolled in some of them. So I've enjoyed that because I really wanted to see how it works. And I just put myself in. Okay. And I was amazed by the kind of things that they have. There are maybe hundreds of tools out there where you can upskill yourself, and that's a market signal. So every time you upskill yourself, you send a market signal saying that, okay, this guy has done this, therefore he has some competency which is beyond other people's competency. So I guess market creates its own ability. In the top 30%, I don't worry that much. My worry occurs more on the lower 70%, where the challenge is much more.
Clearly, that's going to be a big challenge for government. But let me come back to Sanjeev. As you know, in the industry, the big buzz has been around AI in recent times, artificial intelligence. Not only what it's already done, but much more what it's likely to do, especially in the next few years, how dramatically things are changing under the onslaught of AI. And there are doomsday scenarios of people saying, okay, AI will take over and all that. That's one extreme. But there increasingly a view that AI will work in a complementary way with people, or at least that's how we should get it to work. But how will those developments impact this whole online freelancing?
So look, if you want online freelancing career to be successful on a sustainable basis for say 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you've got to be an entrepreneur, right? Which means continuously learning, adapting, upgrading. The reason is simple. The reason is, while online freelancing is an opportunity because it makes your market global, right? You can sit in Noida and service New York, okay? It also means you're facing global competition, not just for those clients overseas, but also for Indian clients. Otherwise, because those guys can, for people from Vietnam and Cambodia can service Indian clients. So you've got global competition in your backyard now. Now with tools like AI and, so I think, and blockchain, I think a lot of people have not fully understood it. Even I have not. We are still trying to come to grips with it. But typically, sir, when transitions take place of this nature, it's only when you look back after 20 years, and you say, okay, this is how the transition impacted. Now, how does the transition impact? We talk about Indian IT services industry and, how the business model of, global IT service delivery is changing, and which is why the Indian model is slightly disadvantaged now, because you just can't throw, your labor arbitrage advantage is less than it used to be, because you don't need so many people to do a project, and therefore you're facing competition from East Europe and Chile and Brazil and Argentina, right, which don't have so many engineers as we do. Now, it does not mean that IT services companies will degrow. They will not degrow. Their growth will slow down, right? And after 10 or 15 years, you will see that the companies that adapted and moved to the new model successfully over 20 years have done well. And those who did not are probably stagnating. They're still not losing business, but they're not growing at that rate anymore. So the transition, sir, will take place over time. In our company, for instance, we've got this AI and analytics team, and we're looking at stuff like that. But the purpose is to make our website work better. It is not to replace our website. Right? Similarly, you will find, I think AI will work in many cases in a complementary manner. Yes, employment may not grow as fast as it would have otherwise, but I don't think it's going to shrink a lot.
So would you say, for example, that you can have AI actually breaking down jobs into tasks the way it was described, and then using data analytics and portals to really be able to assign and integrate those
It is
tasks?
quite possible. It is quite possible. Of course, you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, what works best in what situation. But the truth is that, look, if you're developing your own AI tools, if you're doing data analytics, I mean, that is core IP. That bit will not be outsourced. That may enable you to outsource some other stuff. But typically, at least in India, I don't see companies doing mass sackings because now they've adopted AI.
Okay. So, obviously, Harshan, what you said, the ability of governments to control this kind of competition is reducing. So once your government cannot protect you, you can only achieve so much by stopping people from coming in. You can only achieve so much by putting import duties. You can only achieve so much by all sorts of non-tariff measures in this world. So the question then comes down to how competitive are you? And how important will this online freelancing be for creating and maintaining competitiveness? And is that going to be a big driver?
Thank you. The need for competitiveness obviously has arisen both because of technology itself. AI, for example, as the example given by Mr. Bikhchandani, enhances your effectiveness. It increases because markets now are global. It increases because time zones have blurred. So while you are sleeping, somebody can provide, do a job. It increases because tasks now in value chains are much more significant, so people find ways of actually performing a task. And so that's granularity. In this situation, one has to really look at the answer to your question in the context of what is the nature of the transaction involving the kind of technology which we are talking about. And that links up with the four different examples given. Whether the order is on the internet, whether there is a delivery which is actually physical or not, etc. So the ability of the government to actually control things depends on that model. And it will definitely be lower than what has conventionally been there. But India is a place where there is a lot of slag in terms of the potential and where we are. So the focus, again, should be removed from control to enhancing competitiveness, to facilitating the operations, improving conditions which can connect people better, inform them much more, so that the kind of possibilities, potentials which we have been talking about can be performed more effortlessly. The causes in sight, for instance, being used to reduce costs. And if the policymaker is thinking in the right direction, it's just that it has to be, the large tasks have to be broken down and step by step effectively enhance the efficiency, the way, for example, they've been working on ease of doing business. So the other thing is that you actually need to change the mindset on how to interpret law in terms of competition policy. When the market is global, why should a competition policy dominant supplier definition be limited to your domestic market? So those kind of things.
But there is a fundamental problem there. Competition is global, technology is global, laws are sovereign.
That's
within the
sovereign,
bounded
yes, but
by
the
limits of
interpretation of the concept
Yeah.
is your sovereign right to decide how to interpret it. Thus, the fact that it is a sovereign law does not mean that you interpret it only to cover the region itself for a concept. That's the point I'm making.
But don't you run up against the problem of extraterritorial applicability of your laws?
No, you are applying the law in your territory. The fact that you define a dominant player from a market which is global in your territory, there is no extraterritorial.
Maybe there's more we can talk about but let me end with a last question before opening it to the audience. There were a few more questions, but I don't want to push it beyond a point and leave it to the audience. But, from a NSDC perspective, you talked briefly about it, but what are the areas where there are real opportunities? How is NSDC actually going about it? What are the programs and actual activities that you have undertaken?
So for us, I think one of the key things is to keep continuously exploring what is it that's emerging. And therefore, even our recent board meeting actually spent one full day discussing what is the future of jobs like. And a lot of experts from across India were invited, some of them from abroad too, who participated. Particularly, we are in touch with some of the Israeli groups who are working on the future of jobs, and they're doing quite good in terms of how they look at future. So one is simply understanding the landscape. Secondly, using our sector skill councils to create new job roles that the market would respect and would consider useful to themselves. So that's the second one. And thirdly, ensuring that there is enough innovation partners. So a lot of funding that we have, we want to ensure that they go towards innovative partners. For example, just to give an example, we have been dealing with VAT and Eon Reality, both of them working on virtual reality for how you do trainings in the future. So trying to see that these innovative partners come along. And then finally, I think very important for us also is that we know as an institution, there is only up to a point that we can do this. It's very essential that the states are on board on this issue. They understand the language that's being spoken, they appreciate skill and do not think that this is a waste of money, because many actually feel that way. Unlike when you make a road, you can see a black tar, you can't see a change in the cerebral cortex because of a training. So I think how you ensure that the state government understand the value of it, that's something on which we have been spending a lot of time. And a lot of state governments actually have changed the perception about skills. Maharashtra was an example out here, and actually is one of our best states when it comes to providing training. So it's a combination of these factors. We are working on these multiple fronts.
You know, in my experience in the government, I found that any big program that you take up, any good program for that matter, about 1/3 of the states totally get it and they are entirely pushing the whole game. 1/3 are trying, but they're really not there, and 1/3 couldn't care less. So what is the situation on skilling? Is it similar to that normal rule of 1/3, or is it different?
It's actually a bit different off late. That's what I've found. So I'm actually amazed by some of the states and their interest in skills. Yeah. It's almost like exploding in a way. So I almost feel 2/3 are interested at this point, and 1/3 could not care less.
Okay.
So on 12th of January, we have the Jharkhand state government having a big skill event, and this must be the 3rd event in the whole full year. Okay. So the level, and if you go and see the type of training centers that they've made, it's amazing. Okay. So I guess a lot of interest there.
Just to clarify for the audience, when I said 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, that 1/3 varies from project to program to program. So it's not the same 1/3 who are indifferent in all the cases. Depends on what it is. But anyway, let me, we've got some really interesting ideas, and I think that has only shown up how much more there is to the issue, how many more nuances are hidden behind, all the wealth of research and data that has been put up. So I think let's take the benefit of, a distinguished audience here and open it to questions from the audience, and feel free to pose it to anyone you like, but whoever wants to chip in with the answer is also welcome from this side of the panel to respond. So the floor is open to questions. Yes, I think we'll start at or whoever is nearest to the mic, maybe that might save time. Yeah. Yes. Okay, the gentleman with the mic.
Hello. Yeah, so my question is addressed to the panel.
Yeah.
So one thing which I was looking at, when we talk about online freelancing, we take it as a scenario where we are trying to somewhat address maybe unemployment in India, or we talk about unemployment. But out of my own social experiences and interaction with my own age group and peers, one thing which I've seen, those who are deriving benefits of online freelancing are those which already have a regular job, and then they have certain time to devote, maybe after their working hours, to this kind of scenario. And those who are not having regular jobs, those are the ones which are seeking regular jobs because of the social pressures, especially in the male population. So do you think when we talk about online freelancing and unemployment, we somewhat undermine the importance of regular job firstly, and we somewhat get the concept in a not so right way in a sense, because we might in itself somewhat bias the concept of regular jobs and unemployment. Secondly, my question is towards Dr. Singh. So basically, with the increased protectionism in the Western countries, do you feel as you said, like there's a technology advancement and the AI is also coming in a big way. So it might be a scenario where the multinational and these corporates will in itself circumvent all this protectionism and will somewhat be able to outsource more jobs and in itself have a more trickle down towards the developing countries. So there might be a scenario where the people are not moving abroad for jobs, but the jobs are coming to developing countries in a much better manner, because I'm sure they must be having some solutions for that, and in itself will actually save a lot of cost to these corporates. Thank you.
First part of the question, would you like to take it on online freelancing or online moonlighting only?
Well, look, typically you will find that some of the best programmers, for example, will already be in jobs, and they may do this on weekends. But that's the beginning, right? As it becomes a trend, right, you will discover more and more people doing it, okay? And the truth is, yeah, the more difficult jobs may not be outsourced. Some may be outsourced. It'll require really good programmers. But, but I know it's beyond freelancing. Let's say, there was a site called Elance, right, which would put out software projects. And I know whole companies that have been built that are around getting those individual assignments. And they started off as, being one person doing it. So I would not sort of say it's only for people who are in jobs. Yes, people may do it, but there will still be others who are reasonably skilled who can do it and will take advantage. It's a mixed bag. I don't have a data point or a measurement, what percentage is here, what percentage is there, but I think it's both.
Second question. Yeah. Second question.
Thank you very much. Protectionism is seen more in terms of the unwillingness of countries to continue to open markets or interact in developing regulatory regimes which have the opening of the market effect on those who are members. In terms of actually closing the market, there's far less evidence of the huge discussion we have on protectionism per se. Second, the protectionism takes place, we may call it protectionism, but others may call it facilitation. For example, the tax policy change in the US just now. Those who are going to lose business as a result of investment shifting there may say, hey, this is a result of a protectionist mindset. So one has to distinguish between a mindset and situation on the ground. But you're right that the situation on the ground is getting more difficult and uncertain. Whether jobs will come to developing countries or not, if I go with the kind of correlation which Mr. Bigchandani talked about, economic growth and jobs, etc., so the dynamic regions will continue to get those jobs. Second, geoeconomics and geopolitics, the One Belt, One Road, and the investment program of China of extending links across will be creating jobs. Today, you will have value chains developing in regions such as Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So jobs will definitely go, but not because of protectionism as much as the normal aspirations of large nations to have some kind of influence and the economic growth itself. So yes, there will be shifting. In fact, if you see the global Fortune 500, even before the protectionist era, the share of emerging economies in that 500 by 2023 was projected to be more than 50%.
Okay.
Can I just, I think that was a very interesting question. I think that's an existential problem that we face, and I think we deserve to answer, and we spend much more time on that question. I mean, we will. But my initial thought is that the people who do freelancing, I mean, those will keep changing. It'll be very dynamic. It's not that they will be doing online freelancing throughout. It will not be a permanent source of income or employment for them, but there will always be a cohort of people who would be doing that, and maybe that cohort will expand over time. I mean, but it's a hypothesis. I'm not saying.
You have to look at data to validate that, and I don't think the data exists right now with anybody except the platforms themselves.
Yeah. And one data point that we heard was that 300,000 people registered, but only 100,000 actually working.
Yeah,
so that's
like
another
3 million registered. Sorry,
Yeah,
just
three-
to, and
million,
even on the notion of AI, I think like you were saying, it's quite mixed. So while we think of purely rule-based parts of our jobs, those tasks can get intermediated and automated. There's a whole set of things in AI which actually creates this kind of work. So the classic example is image recognition, and I think you touched on it. There is a need for improving the probabilistic predictiveness of AI models, which require real-world data and humans to actually identify objects and faces and so on. So in the short term, there's a lot of work coming onto platforms to validate and improve the probability of the AI model.
Yeah, the other point I made was, look, India, generally very few transitions are surgical and sudden. It's evolutionary, not revolutionary. Growth will slow down in one sector, one way of doing business, something new will come up. 20 years from now, you'll say, hey, this is now small and that is large. Perhaps future jobs may not be created to that extent in this area, but mass sackings suddenly one day, okay, this is a new way of doing business, that will not happen.
Yeah, okay. The gentleman in the, Anupam, I'll just come to you. Gentleman just behind, behind you, in the middle. He had his hand up for a long time, so I think we'll have enough time to get to everyone, so don't worry.
This is a question specifically to Dr. Manish Kumar, because he talked about cerebral transformations. And I would like to confess that I'm a faculty member at a university who is trying to cause cerebral transformations. And it will be good for us to know what kind of transformations we should catalyze so that our students can keep up with this kind of rapidly changing economy.
So one is, I think, the way we do our schooling probably will need changing. Will need changes as you go ahead. If you look at some of the countries which are adapting to the new economy, or the shared economy as we call it, take the case of Finland, for example. They don't start with theory. They actually start with practicals and then build theory over that. So the place to look for would perhaps be the school, and not once your mind is totally formed and then you're trying to make changes post that period. In our own case, we are working in 7,500 schools, training about 500,000 students in 16 different job roles. And recently we have had a collaboration with Sweden to introduce a module called Kunskapsskolan. So we are trying to see how we could, it's a pilot basically going to be driven in Haryana to understand how schooling in a different way, bringing the practical part of life in the forefront, and then theory follows with that. How that's going to change the cognitive ability of the individuals. So that's what we are working on. Maybe we can chat on that later.
Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So we'll take them up one by one. We'll start, yes? Yeah.
Sir, I'm Dr. Zena. My question is to Dr. Manish Kumar. This is on skilling, because I happen to be, I'm from COI, and I happen to be the founding CEO of TSS, the Telecom Sector Skill Council. NSDC is doing a wonderful job in skilling people in large number. But the market, if you look at the market about the employability, this is in the reverse direction. So freelancing perhaps will be an excellent opportunity for the creation of the job. You have the sector skill councils which can be perhaps tasked with, there are certain skill sets which can always be freelancing. Say, for example, a carpenter. He's always an entrepreneur and a freelancer. You are training him, upskilling him. But you are not providing any platform for him to seek a job. There are a lot of platforms which has come up like Urban Club and all these things. But as NSDC, can you encourage the sector skill councils to come out with freelancing platforms where their own people can use that and get the job? There is enough demand. So like I will give two examples in the telecom sector. You got mobile repairing is one activity which is perhaps requires a large number of people. The demand is there, but this connection is not the customer and the deliverer. The connection is not there. Similarly, people in the villages also pay for 1 GB data per day. But there is nobody to tell them how to use this data more effectively for them, rather than they waste the time or they use it for just seeing movies. So perhaps this can be a big opportunity for the sector skill councils, which can be driven by NSDC.
So this mobile repairing is one of the formal job roles now. So probably, I mean, they must have made it into a job role over the last 1-2 years. And it's one of the most, I think, the hottest thing which sells when it comes to PMKY. It really is high in demand. Computer peripherals and mobile repair. These are two great things which I think is hot in demand. That's what we have found. And I guess when it comes to freelancing in the way you were mentioning it, we have entrepreneurship module which is embedded in our PMKVY trainings. So there is almost 40 hours of training on how entrepreneurship could be undertaken, and that provides basic platform knowledge. In addition to that, we also are partnering with DASRA, which is a group which is basically an NGO run in Pune by Mr. Anand Deshpande. And that's focusing on entrepreneurship. So we try to connect people to entrepreneurship also, because not everybody will get job. And those who don't get job must have some other ways of living. To also comfort you that although I think maybe about a year back, people whom we train, only about 15% were getting employed. Today it's about 45% in the case of grant-based model. And if you look at the fee-based model is around 55. So it's actually increased over time. Perhaps because of the economy.
Yeah, just permit me to add to that, because NASSCOM is the Sector Skills Council for the IT sector, and we are one of their offsprings. So, we have now actually decided to focus on certain new skill areas which we see having huge future demand. 8 technology areas, 55 job roles, including AI, data analytics, machine learning, and so on. And we are in the process of setting up a platform along with a global partner to improve skills in those areas which are going to be in demand. So that's partly our response as an industry. But the numbers may not be that large, whereas from a government point of view, they look at very large numbers which tend to be lower skill levels, I think 1 to 4 as they call it. We are looking at 5 to 7 on specialized areas. But so yeah, we'll just come to that. Let me just follow a little bit of a sequence there in terms of first come, first served. It's not a very good term in today's world, but let me go to first come, first served.
My issue is very
with due process, it's okay, yes. So I've got to follow the process lest the CAG raises some issues, yeah.
Sir, my issue is very simple and, of course, difficult and complicated. Needs, conditions, and opportunities are always there. Nobody can deny that. Risk-taking abilities has not been generated by educational process in our country. See, that we need to change our educational system to meet these requirements that we are setting it up, whether now or in future.
Yeah.
Family background also matters. If a member of the higher parents have not done these things.
So, would you have a question for any of the panelists?
Yeah, I am suggesting something.
Yeah.
And my suggestion is this: start at the college level, start at the educational systems level. These things, then automatically things will change. That is what I'm saying.
Okay. Would anyone like to respond? Anyone? Anyone would like?
We are helping convert a lot of engineering colleges that we're closing down into skill universities. So we are trying to work at college level. I think what you said is important, that as a culture, people should believe that skill is something to go for. So that's what we are trying to imbibe.
Okay. Yeah, let me come to Anupam. Yeah. Yes, I think, I'm sorry, first come, first served goes to you. And then to Anupam.
Well, this is MC Verma. I have worked for the ILO and I was also advisor employment in the Planning Commission. I have 2 observations and 2 questions. The LFPR, the labor force participation rate, traditionally is affected by various other factors which apparently we have not taken note of. For example, the basic income of the family decides to an extent whether a woman will go out and do the work outside. If the family gets extra money, they will probably tell the woman, you need not go out and work outside. Similarly, it has been observed in the various ILO studies that middle level education, say metric level, that attracts the least LFPR. The lower or the higher category, they have much higher participation rate. These are only observations. In terms of what the online work or freelancing can do, the basic question arises is whether the government, well, basically the government, but maybe the community, can provide a universal basic income to each of the families, something which has been now mentioned in the India's recent Chief Economic Advisor's report, and it is under consideration by the SCAP in Bangkok. Or, if not the basic income, at least the universal health cover, which is also under consideration. Is that not a major factor which will facilitate rise of freelancing and micro work? The last question is about the multi-skilling. You see, the government has in the past continuously harped on not a single skill but multi-skilling. Is that an answer to some of the problems which are going to be faced in the new jobs crisis? Thank you.
Some quick answers to those multiple questions from either from Dr. Manish or Harsh or Sanjeev, anyone?
So I would say it's not just family income. I think that may be an important factor. But I would say education levels of mother and education level of mother-in-law, they play a big role. Who's allowed to work, who's not allowed to work. Number one. Number two is some multi-skilling, yes. But in actual practice, it may not be so easy. And it's very hard to take a computer programmer with 10 years experience and now you're a salesman. Go and sell. People don't do it so easily. It's about personality types, it's about skills, it's about experience. So that has to be viewed with, case by case basis again.
Interesting insights into social dynamics as well.
So on the universal basic income, I really don't know much to make a comment, but I just want to highlight something which government of Haryana is doing, where everybody who is graduate and doesn't have a job, they give 2,000 rupee. So I think it's important perhaps to understand in the Indian context how this is working out. Yeah. Is it leading to people not getting into job market because they get money anyway? How does it really play out? I think that's an important one. Health insurance, obviously, if it's possible, there should be, and I'm sure the government has made this effort to the extent that's possible.
In fact, in a state and a government already won a whole election on the basis of health insurance. But Anupam, you had some question?
My question to the panel is, from your different perspectives, what light can you shed on who is the buyer for these jobs? Because I'm afraid the survey didn't do that. Maybe Helani had done that. And I think that's a very critical one, because I came looking, say, is online freelancing a problem for us, or is it a possible solution for us? It's a problem for many people, at least in the West. The reason is not just our jobs are going, but what the jobs are being downgraded. Security, etc. Many jobs which were provided adequate living conditions are no longer there. For people, jobs which remain even in America. It could be an opportunity. For example, in India, it could be an opportunity in the tourism sector, that it could provide jobs, in all our sectors, whether it's infrastructure or the economic sector. We have a last mile problem. And that last mile problem is something that online freelancing can do. So could it be a solution? I'm afraid I don't see any evidence as yet on either one, but perhaps it's a totally third solution that it's providing for a totally different problem, which is the only takeaway I have, is this is an avenue to solve a big jobs problem that we have, which is the mismatch in skills and jobs. So the way I think it was described is that as people take these jobs, they acquire certain skills which command a premium in the marketplace. So is that the problem we are solving? And perhaps we are barking up the wrong tree when we think of direct employment creation or destruction.
Well, I'll allow everyone to have a quick shot at this.
So I'll take who's the customer. So my sense, and I don't have data on this, but my sense is a large company will typically not put out freelance jobs on these platforms on an industrial scale. Hey, I've got 7,000 freelance jobs here, come and take them. It's small companies. These people want to cut cost. Sometimes it's contractors and subcontractors who've got an assignment from a larger company but are now aggregating workers across the world, right? And that's fine. That's how markets typically evolve. Once it becomes the ready way of doing things or mainstream way of doing things, who knows? Maybe even large companies may start to do it, right? But I don't think large companies have got big departments which are going to manage this stuff.
Okay. Any last comments before we wind up? Now I think we're out of time, so.
I just have one observation, rather 2 points on this. One is, I think the market, when it clears out, essentially means somebody is gaining, two people are definitely gaining in the margin. So whether it's buyer or the seller, both of them are gaining. That's the reason why the market exists. I think the larger issue is about what you mentioned, is about the information asymmetry that comes in trying to find out who is the right individual. So there are some interesting things happening in the behavioral economics. In India, there is something called NAC, which we are trying to experiment with. It's an app which you can download and you can play that app. The app is interesting in the sense that you just play a game with that. But in about 30 minutes, I can decompose your personality into 72 different traits. And then I can tell you, using that, which are the job roles you're good for, which you're not good for. Okay. So therefore, that's the direction in which we are moving. And I guess that's the type of information which might be useful eventually for market to clear in a better way.
Okay, thank you.
Very quickly. The answer to your question depends on your time horizon and also the way technology starts connecting with supply chain changes. So although right now it might be the small industry, it might be these apps which give rise to this, but you go down 5-10 years, the composition could be far more diverse, far more extensive. That's the way technology is changing. And freelancers are, since time, geography, etc., are just merging. When there are options to come in and there are standards to judge the quality, the freelancers will only increase in number of ways.
Just to quickly.
Just want 30 seconds.
Sure.
It is not our intention to use this study to solve a sort of employment problem. I think that would be too much. We've begun to do this research and identify the challenges. And as Harsh says, maybe it will become much more large scale. And
so
the
this
momentum.
is the diagnostic. The remedies will have to come separately.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have no ambition to.
Okay. Yeah, they didn't make it happen. They're just seeing it's happening. What's it about?
Just wanted to add, Anupam, in addition to all the points made, I think there's also a great opportunity for a more equitable geographical distribution of opportunities. There are still 2 or 3 people who have questions, but I'm afraid we are out of time and I don't want to destroy all opportunities for lunchtime conversation. So we can continue with these. We can continue over lunch. I am already signaled that we are way over time. Thank you very much, and I really want to thank all the panelists for some wonderful insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But please, we'll give the panelists gifts, I think. Mansi, why don't you, Gangesh?
So in very Sri Lankan style, it's tea we must give.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Most valuable.
Yes.
So Rita's son's reception at IIC. I had to be there 1 hour ago. Sujata. Oh. To which one? Sanjeev.
Half a second.
Sorry. Rajat,
Come, please.
The team.
with the researchers, yes.
Please come.
And the team.
Please come.
Can you stand behind and have the team in front in between? They can.
Yes.
Yeah, you can come in between.
There are many much shorter people. Please come.
Come here.
Come in front.
Come, guys.
Is the research team trained by ICRIER or they are building a resume?
They're all
Except
gigging.
one. All except
All
one.
gigging.
All except
Any of them freelancers?
Sujata, I go and call him. Because